Elena stumbled backward, her scream choking in her throat. The apartment felt wrong, as if something unseen had seeped into its very walls, tainting the air with an unnatural presence. The whisper still echoed in her mind. "I never left." Her eyes darted to the open door. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee this place and never look back. But where would she go? And more importantly, would it even let her leave? Her breath came in sharp gasps as she forced herself to focus. Think. She reached for her phone, her hands trembling. No service. Panic tightened around her chest. The signal had never failed in her apartment before, but tonight, everything was different. A sudden click echoed through the room. The front door slammed shut. Elena whirled around. She was trapped. The shadows moved. Her body trembled as she scanned the room. Everything looked the same, yet different. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, stretching unnaturally. The dim glow of the hallway light barely reached inside, making the darkness around her feel alive. Then she noticed something. The hallway mirror. She had passed it 100 times before without a second thought, but now something about it felt wrong. Slowly she turned toward it. Her own reflection stared back, pale, wide-eyed, terror-stricken, but something was off. She took a step forward, her pulse hammering in her ears. Then, her reflection blinked. She hadn't. Elena's blood ran cold. The reflection grinned, a slow, unnatural smile stretching across its face. She staggered backward. "No, this isn't real," she whispered. The reflection moved, stepping closer to the glass, its expression twisted with something inhuman. Then, it spoke. "You brought him here." Elena's heart stopped. The thing in the mirror wasn't her. She turned away, clutching her head. This wasn't happening. It was just another hallucination, another trick. But then, a movement in the corner of her eye. The mirror. Her reflection wasn't alone anymore. The old man stood behind it, behind her. Elena spun around, knife raised. Nothing. But in the mirror, he was still there, standing right behind her. Her breath hitched as the reflection of his bony fingers reached toward her. She moved to run, but her reflection didn't. It stood still, eyes locked on hers. Then, it whispered, "Run!" The mark left behind. Elena didn't hesitate. She sprinted for the hallway, shoving open her bedroom door and slamming it shut behind her. She pressed her back against it, her breath ragged. This wasn't just a ghost. This wasn't a simple haunting. Something else had entered her life. She glanced around the dimly lit room, heart racing. Then, she noticed her arm. Something dark was there. She lifted her sleeve, her hands trembling. There, etched into her skin, was a mark. A symbol she didn't recognize, but instinctively knew wasn't supposed to be there. It was deep, almost burned into her flesh, like it had been there forever. Terror surged through her veins. Whatever had come into her home, it had touched her. It had marked her. A whisper in the dark. The silence in the room grew heavier. The air felt thick, suffocating. Then, a breath, right by her ear. Elena's body froze. Something was in the room with her. Slowly, painfully, she turned her head. The closet door was open, just a crack. Darkness stretched beyond it. Too dark, deeper than any normal shadow. She clutched the knife tighter, swallowing the lump in her throat. Then, the whisper, soft, almost gentle. "He is inside you now." Elena's vision blurred. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, her knees buckling. The room tilted, the walls distorting. She tried to fight it, but an unbearable coldness seeped into her bones. Her eyelids grew heavy, and as she collapsed to the floor, the last thing she saw was the closet door, slowly swinging open. Elena awoke to darkness. For a moment, she wasn't sure where she was. The air was thick, damp, filled with a scent she couldn't quite place. Earthy, metallic, wrong. Her body felt numb, her limbs heavy as if something unseen held her down. Her mind struggled to recall what had happened. Then, it hit her. The whisper, the closet door swinging open, the feeling of something pulling her under. A sharp jolt of panic shot through her as she tried to sit up, but she couldn't move. Something was holding her down. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps. The darkness around her wasn't just darkness. It was alive. It pressed against her skin, slithered beneath her clothes, filled her mouth with the taste of something rotten. She forced herself to focus, to move anything, but her body refused to obey. And then, a sound. Soft at first, a low, guttural chuckle. It was close, too close. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. She couldn't see anything, but she could feel it. Watching, waiting. Elena. Her blood ran cold. The voice was inside her head. Slowly, the darkness around her began to shift, pulling back. Shapes formed, shadows stretched and twisted. And then, she saw him, the old man. But he wasn't an old man anymore. He stood at the foot of the bed, his body impossibly tall, his limbs too thin, too elongated. His face was a sickening distortion of human features, his mouth stretched too wide, his eyes nothing but black voids. His bony fingers twitched, as if eager to reach for her. "You, let me in," he rasped. "And now, you are mine." The thing beneath the skin. Elena's body jerked violently. Pain exploded in her chest, as if something was crawling inside her, twisting beneath her skin. She gasped, a scream trapped in her throat. Her fingers clawed at her own flesh, trying to stop whatever was moving beneath it. The old man's grin widened. He took a slow step forward, his bare feet not making a sound against the wooden floor. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered. She tried to shake her head, tried to deny it, but she did feel it. Something was inside her now, burrowing deeper, claiming her. Tears burned her eyes as she fought to move, fought to scream, but it was useless. The old man leaned down, his rotting breath hot against her ear. "This body was weak," he murmured, "but yours will last." Elena's body convulsed. The darkness in the room thickened, swallowing everything around her. Her vision blurred, the world tilting and twisting. And then, she was falling. The other side. She hit the ground hard. Cold, wet earth pressed against her back. The air was damp, filled with the scent of rotting leaves and something worse. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. She was no longer in her apartment. The sky above was black. Not the black of night, something deeper, emptier, endless. There were no stars, no moon, just an abyss stretching infinitely above her. Around her, twisted trees loomed, their branches moving as if they were alive. This wasn't Earth. This wasn't anywhere she had ever known. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she struggled to her feet, the ground beneath her shifting, like something was crawling just beneath the surface. And then, she heard it. A low, inhuman whisper. "Elena." She turned slowly. The old man was standing just a few feet away, his body still shifting, still stretching into something that barely resembled human anymore. "This is where I come from," he said, his voice almost gentle. "And now, it is where you belong." Her stomach twisted. No, this wasn't happening. She took a step back, her heart hammering in her chest. I don't belong here," she stammered. The old man smiled. "But you do." Elena's breath hitched. She turned to run and froze. Because behind her, dozens of figures stood in the darkness. Men, women, some old, some young. All of them pale, hollow-eyed, unmoving. Their mouths hung open in silent screams. Their skin was cracked, like something had tried to escape from within. They weren't alive, and yet their eyes followed her. She staggered backward, bile rising in her throat. "No," she whispered. No, no, no. The old man took a step forward, his voice almost soothing. They let me in, he said. Just like you did. Elena's hands trembled. She looked down at her arm. The mark was growing. Dark veins were spreading from it, curling up her skin like roots sinking deep into her flesh. And then, a terrible, searing pain exploded in her chest. She collapsed, her body convulsing. Something was breaking inside her. Something was trying to get out. And as she screamed, the last thing she saw was the old man smiling, welcoming her home. Elena's screams echoed through the void, swallowed by the oppressive darkness stretching endlessly around her. Her body convulsed, the searing pain in her chest spreading outward, as though something inside her was awakening. The mark on her arm had grown, black veins curling up her skin, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. She clawed at it, desperate to stop whatever was happening to her. But the pain only deepened. Something was moving beneath her flesh, twisting, writhing, consuming. The old man loomed over her, his grotesque face stretched into a grin too wide, too unnatural. "This is how it begins," he whispered. Elena gasped, her breath coming in ragged bursts. "What are you?" The old man crouched beside her, his shadow merging with the darkness around them. "I was like you once," he murmured, "a foolish soul who thought kindness meant salvation." His grin widened, his blackened eyes filled with something ancient and endless. "But this place does not reward kindness. It only takes." Elena's fingers dug into the cold earth as another wave of agony surged through her. Something was changing inside her, something irreversible. She could feel it spreading, unraveling her humanity, reshaping her into something else. She wasn't alone in her own body anymore. The others who came before, the figures surrounding her began to move. Men, women, children, their hollow eyes locked onto her, their bodies stiff and jerky as if they had long forgotten how to move. But their lips whispered, "Join us, join us, join us." Their words slithered into her mind, pulling at her thoughts, inviting her into the darkness. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, fighting the pull. She wasn't like them. She wasn't lost yet. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she forced herself to stand. The old man watched her with something almost resembling amusement. "You resist." Elena's legs shook beneath her, her breath shallow, but she stood firm. "I won't let you take me." The old man tilted his head. "But child, you already belong to us." A fight against the darkness. A sudden, unbearable coldness gripped Elena's chest. She gasped, clutching at it. Her skin was splitting open. The mark on her arm pulsed, dark tendrils weaving their way up to her throat. She could feel it now. Something inside her was awakening, and if she didn't stop it, she would become one of them. Panic surged through her, but deep beneath it, something else stirred. Rage. They had tricked her, lured her in with a plea for help. They had used her kindness against her. She would not become one of them. Elena clenched her fists, summoning everything she had left. Her body screamed in protest, the darkness inside her fighting back. But she pushed through the pain, forced herself to move. Her eyes darted around the void. There had to be a way out. A door, a passage, something. And then, she saw it. A faint glimmer in the distance, a tear in the darkness, an exit, the escape. Elena ran. The figures lurched toward her, their hollow mouths stretching open, releasing a deafening wail. The old man's voice boomed behind her. "You cannot leave!" The ground beneath her shook violently, the air thickening, trying to drag her down. But she kept running. The pain inside her was unbearable now. Her skin burned, her vision blurred. She could feel the thing inside her fighting to take over, but she was stronger. She reached the glowing tear and threw herself through it. For a moment, there was nothing, just endless, suffocating blackness. Then, light. back to reality, but not the same. Elena hit the ground hard. Cold air rushed into her lungs as she gasped, her entire body aching. She blinked rapidly, trying to adjust. She was back in her apartment. The clock on her nightstand read 3:17 a.m. The room was exactly as it had been before. No shadows, no whispers. For a moment, she just lay there, struggling to breathe. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? Then she felt it, a deep, lingering coldness inside her. Slowly, she pulled up her sleeve. The mark was still there. And when she looked in the mirror across the room, for just a split second, she saw the old man grinning back at her. The end.